He's a player. He's a player now. He's a player. I know, he's a player. If you know that song, you were born in a great decade.
I like to dedicate this to all of the Creator's righteous children. I have some food in my bag for you. Not that edible food, that food you eat. No, I have some food for thought. Since knowledge is infinite, it has infinitely fell on me.
Hi, people of YouTube. Today I'm going to be doing another 80s, 90s black sitcom mukbang. Today on the 80s, 90s black sitcom mukbang, we are doing Moesha. Mo to the E to the Mo to the E to the Moesha. And on the menu today, we have some delicious Ethiopian and some injera. And we're about to get this conversation started. So buckle up because I got lots to say. So basically, Moesha is a show. It came out in the 90s, clearly. And it came out, I think, 94. And lasted until like 2001. And it was actually a really good show for a really long time. Until it started to flop. And tell you why during this mukbang. But let's start off with the basics. So you have Brandy, and she's a singer. And she was making a platinum selling album at the time, right? She came out with her debut album, Brandy. And it has a bunch of bops on it. So if you were not born in the 90s and you're just watching this because you're curious about shows from the 90s and music from the 90s, you need to go back and you need to listen to Brandy's self-titled debut album, Brandy, because it's got the bops, the bops, you know, Best Friend, I Want to Be Down, baby, so good, so good. Anyways, so she came out with that, and people were really checking for her, right? So she was on this show originally called Thea before she got her music contract. And Jason Weaver was in it, I think. And you can find clips online of her singing Respect by Aretha Franklin. But it didn't really go anywhere. And so then she just continued to do her music. But then she got approached about doing Moesha. And Moesha became a thing. It lasted until 2001. And we're going to talk about that today. So, yeah. So basically the premise of Moesha is it's about a, I guess she's like 15-year-old, like freshman in high school, black, from Crenshaw in California, who basically it's just about her life, and it's just a black sitcom about her life in California, in how she just goes on with life with her friends and her dad, and how her mom has passed away, so her dad just got remarried to her school principal, and she has a little brother, and now she just all of that, and just the daily ins and outs of being, you know, 15 and going to high school, being black in the 90s, basically. And so that was basically the premise for a long time. And you know, it was a little bit different. So the last mukbang I did was on Sister Sister, right? And Sister Sister is a great show, but it's a little bit different than Moesha. Moesha was very much drama filled, I will say, when it came to a lot of different things, and it dealt with a lot of different things more so than Sister Sister, because I think I talked about in the Sister Sister one, which you can watch somewhere on the screen, you can watch, or link down below. But Moesha was very much different than Sister Sister, because Sister Sister's whole premise of the show is basically like very, very, very like PG, almost G rated, right? And for Moesha, she was very much PG, almost PG-13, right? And I'll say why. Because she dealt with a lot of different issues that Sister Sister never touched, like sex, like racism, like being gay, like just a lot of different issues. You know, she fought with her dad like constantly, Frank, and they're always beefing, but the reason they were beefing was because Frank is overprotective, right? But I will say Moesha was doing some stuff that was a little bit shady, let's be real. She got a tattoo, she had a credit card that she used to bail out her boyfriend Q, which we're going to get into Q, and all the boys she was ever into. And she was also very spoiled, if you think about it, because Moesha, there's this one episode where she really wanted to get a Jeep, right? And she wanted to get this ghetto-ass, tore-up Jeep. It wasn't even working well. But her dad, he had just opened a Saturn dealership, right? And I know it's a Saturn, but whatever. She had the nerve to turn down a Saturn that her dad got her, right? And he let her. That is how I know she was a spoiled person. Because honestly, her friends, Kim, Nisi, and Hakeem, were all very much lower middle class, right? Like Nisi, she had like a bunch of brothers and sisters. And Kim, she was a single parent household. And same with Hakeem. So they really didn't have money like that. So when Moesha sometimes would go around and she'd be like prancing around, like showing her money, like throwing her money in their face, sometimes they would kind of like catch her on it and be like, look, like we don't have money like that, so chill. And like I just thought that was real selfish for you to like not to turn down a Saturn for some like hokey dokey Jeep that didn't even work that well at all. But something I really liked about Moesha was that she was also very much a feminist who cared a lot about women's issues. She loved poetry. Her favorite person was Maya Angelou. And she was a good role model, to be honest. Like, she was an extremely good role model who she just was like, you know, the girl next door, except for black and like a tiny bit more like, I don't want to say ghetto. I really just don't. But she was different than his sister. Like his sister was like, I could live next to Cleaver's type black. Like I could be that one white guy's or that one white family's black friend that lives like next door. That's how I looked at his sister and Tia Tamara on that show versus Moesha. And because she lived in a black neighborhood, but she lived in a well-to-do black neighborhood, so like there was that. But anyways, so yeah, basically, you know, she just went through her life, but she just would beef with Frank all the time. Like they would always get into fights. Like she even moved out of the house one time because what started the whole thing was that she was dating this guy named Q. And Q, they tried to make out to be like this gangster type person. But really, Q was just this guy who was from New York, right? And he didn't really think that school was necessary for him to make it out in the world. And he wanted to be a rapper. And I didn't see anything wrong with that. But Frank couldn't deal with it, right? And so they would always be butting heads because Moesha loved Q, but Frank would not let her see him, right? And so this one day, Q came over to Moesha's house when Frank and Dee were not home. And basically, Frank and Dee ended up finding Q and Moesha kissing on her bed. Now, the only reason they were was because Q ended up going upstairs and he was supposed to be staying downstairs while she got a CD. But he went upstairs to go, you know, whatever. And then he just kissed her and they ended up falling on the bed on accident. And then Frank and Dee found them. But like, honestly, if we're going to be honest about this, like really honest, for me, it's like Moesha, she was kind of asking for it, to be honest, because she would bait her father a lot when it came to a lot of things. And so it was kind of like, well, really? But so then she ends up having to go to this private school and switch schools from the one that she was at. And she meets this guy named Jeremy. Her and Q break up. Her and Jeremy start sort of dating or whatever. And they're at this party one time, right? And it's like a sleepover party, but she didn't know that the guys were going to be spending the night. So she ends up going to this party, and her and Jeremy are just talking on the stairs, right? And he asks her to go upstairs with him. And she says no at first, but then she eventually decides to go upstairs with him. Not because they were going to do anything, but just because they were going to go talk. And so the minute Frank walks in the door, he embarrasses her so bad. So they go home, and Frank basically blows up on her like, you know, you shouldn't have been trying to go upstairs with him. And then she was like, well, I didn't know they were spending the night. So then she ended up basically getting kicked out of the house. Not because Frank kicked her out, but because Moesha decided to leave. So she goes to stay with Andel, who owned the den, which was the like hangout spot. And she ends up living with her for like at least a whole like 3 to 4 months, right? And so during that time, she ends up dating this other guy played by Brandon Adams, who, if you don't know who that is, he played in The Sandlot, he played in the Moonwalker videos, and the Batter video when he was like little kid for Michael Jackson. And he was also in Sister Sister and a bunch of other stuff, right? The Sandlot, whatever. So he played her boyfriend for like a hot minute. He was like in college or whatever. He was fine too. I love him. He was so fine. And anyways, hashtag 90s hottie. Anyways, but yeah, so he was on there and he was playing her boyfriend, and they dated for like, well, 2 episodes that they showed, right? And one of those, she was about to lose her virginity to him, but didn't really pan out because he had already lost his, so that was awkward. But at any rate, so then she eventually moves back home. And when she moves back home, they have this episode about Miles, and Miles is her little brother. And basically for the whole show, he's only seen as being like the little brother that's cute and could dance and whatever. But then he's also seen as the little brother who ends up being told to go to his room all the time whenever Moesha was getting reprimanded. So they ended up having this episode about Miles and how Miles started smoking pot. Now, mind you, this is the 90s. So they were trying to really force it in your brain, like, pot is bad, you're gonna die. And I was over here like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. And then later on, of course, now, today, being 27, I'm like, really? Like, I know he was like 12, so like that's awkward, but like, are you serious? Are you really? Like, stop. No, he's probably like 9 or 10, I don't even know, but he was like young, so like I get it then, but like seriously, you act like he was about to die. Like, he was not, but I get it. They're trying to act like you're gonna end up like the bums at the liquor store or the 7-Eleven or something. I was like, what? Are you tripping? You're tripping. But at any rate, so then they have that special episode about him smoking pot, and then the next episode they end up going to therapy, right? And then it basically comes out that Miles was mad at everybody because he always feels like he's ignored by the family because all they care about is Moesha. And then, you know, during the episode when Moesha was leaving to go live with Andel for that time, Miles asked her to stay home, don't leave. And she was like, I have to, Miles, I'm sorry. And then he blows up on her in the therapy session. He's like, I told you not to leave. Like, I wanted you to stay. Like, and I felt for him because that's real hard. Like, you love your older sister because she's your older sister. So, like, that's real messed up. You know, like, just leave me here with these people. Like, I love mom and dad, but you're my older sister and I told you to stay. Like, that's real messed up. But at any rate, so yeah, that happens. I know this is like really random and like all over the place, but like if you've seen the show, then you get it. And if not, you should go watch the show because the show is amazing. But I have to talk about this one part of this whole series and why this show kind of went downhill after a hot minute, because it just could not deal with its life. And they just ruined it by being stupid. They just ruined a good show by being stupid. So the first 4 seasons are like, you know, drama, but, you know, mild drama, right? And like normal, like teenage, like this is gonna happen to you, like type drama, like nothing really serious, right? So that happens. 4 seasons of that. Season 5 comes along. So in the beginning, you have Moesha and her 3 friends, Hakeem, who is their next door neighbor, who comes over and always eats all their food and is just like always hungry and is like Moesha's best friend. And then you have Nisi, who has a lot of brothers and sisters and is just around. It's not really funny, but like doesn't really have a stick either. She's just like Moesha's friend. And then you have Kim, who is her other best friend, who ends up having her own show later, called The Parkers with Monique. But she ends up, so she's her best friend, and she comes from a 1-parent household, doesn't have a lot of money. So basically those 3 are part of Moesha's social circle for most of the show. Add in a few boyfriends here and there, and you basically have, you know, her core people. Season 5 comes along. After they graduate high school, Kim ends up leaving the show to go be on The Parkers. So after that, it's just Hakeem and Nisi who end up being Moesha's posse, whatever, her crew. And so for that, she ends up with that being her crew. And but that's not really the reason why season 5, I mean, it is sort of kind of, but there's one big thing that makes season 5 like really, really messed up. So season 5 ends up being really weird because, so apparently Moesha has this cousin named Dorian, played by Ray J, her brother, in real life. She has a cousin named Dorian who comes to stay with her family. It is revealed during season 5, while Moesha is enrolling in college, that Frank ended up, so Frank basically is Dorian's dad instead of Dorian's uncle, because Frank had an affair on Moesha's mother. And that takes the whole show by storm. And the show just basically goes back downhill after that, right? So basically for the rest of the show, there's only like a season and a half, like season 5, and I think season 6 is like a season maybe, and then it's over, right? And the show ends on a cliffhanger because it couldn't deal with its life, and also because Brandy was going through some personal issues like in real life. But I feel like because of the way that they tried to bring so much drama into the show for no reason, they really messed it up. So Dee, who played Moesha's stepmom, she basically, Cheryl Lee Ralph, who played Dee on the show, basically leaves the show after the 5th season because she couldn't deal with the way that they tried to pull down and bring down a beautiful black family and a beautiful black man, right? A black father. And I agree, because that was real messed up. Like, I don't understand why you would do that. Like, what was the point of that? Like, why did that gain? And so for that, you know, it was just like, oh, so now you just messed up the whole show, and there's just no redeeming qualities of the show, so I'm out. So she leaves, basically, and the show just goes to crap. Like, it's really sad because it was like really a good show. Like, I really liked it. It was like funny. Kim was really hilarious. Like, I loved her on the show. She had this massive crush on Hakeem for like the first 2 seasons, and it was hilarious to watch. You know, watching Moesha with her boyfriends and all that drama, and her getting upset with Frank all the time, like cute little like teenage drama moments were like cute. But then they just took it to a whole other level for no reason. Like, Dorian walked in the door and it was like, well, now we get to share this deep dark secret, which like wasn't really there before, but we're about to talk about it anyways. And you're like, really? And then another thing was that once Kim left and started being the Parkers, they had to make Nisi, who really wasn't the funny one at all during the show. We had to make Nisi the funny one. So they tried really hard to make Nisi the funny one. It didn't work. She was not funny. So it was just like stale. And then they tried so hard to make Hakeem and Moesha a thing. Like, so hard. And I was over here like, no, stop. Like, I appreciate them as friends, right? And like, that's cute. But like, you're doing too much. You're just doing too much. Like, the writers were doing way too much at that time. And I was over here like, this is why the show is going downhill so bad. Because you just can't deal. Like, I will admit, even as far as season 2, they did have like small, and I mean extremely small, hints of like Moesha and Hakeem. Like, but it was like things that were like, it's never really gonna happen. So then when season 5 rolls around and they just tried really hard to like put them together, it's like awkward. And then when she ends up with Q again and almost gets married to him, it's like, yes, go with Q. But then that doesn't happen and she ends up with Hakeem anyways. But in the end, it's like no one really knows what's going to happen anyways, because it ends on a cliffhanger, because the writers and Brandy herself was going through a lot personally, right? And so, you know, she was having a lot of health problems. She was under a lot of stress. She was about to have a baby. Like, there was a lot of things going on. But even though she was going through a lot of stuff, they could have fixed a lot of the problems that Moesha was having way before, like, Brandy started having all these issues, right? And I just feel like they didn't. And I think that really ruined the whole integrity of the show. Granted, there are a lot of people, including myself, who still look at the first 4 seasons as really good, solid seasons, and will watch those over and over and over again, and still have a lot of faith in the show, and like what Brandy brought to the screen, and like the whole dynamic of the show. But those 2 seasons after that whole I'm Dorian's father, I cheated on your mom, it was too much. And then I couldn't deal with it anymore. And then when they ended up on a cliffhanger, Miles is still out there in the world being kidnapped. Somebody is still pregnant. It's just really ridiculous. And I just could not deal. So I was like, deuces, Moesha. Deuces. But, yeah. Shout out to Lamont Bentley and also to Yvette Wilson, 2 of the cast members that have sadly passed away. Yvette, she played Andel, who owned the den, and Lamont Bentley played Hakeem. And Lamont Bentley was killed in a drive-by shooting. And then Yvette Wilson, I think, passed away of cancer a few years ago. But real sad, because they were both really talented. Yeah, Moesha is a weird show for me. You know, I really love it. Like, I could watch reruns of Moesha every day for the rest of my life. But at the same time, like, I just don't know anymore. You know what I mean? Like, the show really took a turn for me for the worst. And I couldn't deal after a while. Like, the show just started to become too much. And then it just dropped. And I feel like Ray J coming onto the show and becoming D-Money. And then trying to be all gangster and like bringing a whole new side to the show was just a little too extra for me. And I was just like, you took the whole integrity of the show and threw it away. Kim is gone, so now you have no like funny antagonist type stuff. So when things get too heavy, there's nobody there to be funny about it. And it's just like, what did you do with the show? So for those reasons alone, I have to give this show a C+, and I totally would give it a higher grade, honestly, if not for those last 2 seasons. I want to give it such a higher grade. Like, in my brain, I really want to give it a B+, even an A, but I can't, because those last 2 seasons are really a lot, and I can't. So, yeah. Have you all seen Moesha? Do you love it? Is it too much for you? Do those last seasons hurt the reputation of that show? Or do you bypass those and really just look at the first 4 seasons and really just look at the talented cast, the great storylines, and the funny, witty humor? Because that's what I look at. Some really important and great episodes and moments from the show that I loved were, like I said, the episode where they go to therapy for Miles. CPQ with Niecy, that whole group, great, incredible, honestly the best. Another thing, I really think that Countess Vaughn, who played Kim, should have had more singing opportunities on the show, but didn't, which is sad. But I am glad that they let her be in CPQ, and I am glad that they had her singing a little bit, because honestly, she's a really good singer, and she should have had a better career in that lane instead of just Brandy. Like, I love Brandy, like, I really love Brandy, but like, Countess Vaughn should have had just as big a career as Brandy, but for some reason she didn't. I love that. I love any episode really with Moesha and Q, because they were really cute. But I also loved, and it's really sad, oh my gosh, so I just thought of this. The first person that Moesha ever dated was this guy named Ohaji, played by Merlin Santana. And then she ended up with Hakeem, played by Lamont Bentley, and they both passed away. That's so sad. Anyways, I'm getting on a tangent. But, yeah, I mean, Jeremy, played by Usher. Yeah. And just so many good moments and episodes, you know. I mean, she was a great role model, a feminist. She cared about women's issues. She was always putting men in their place, putting them in check. I mean, what's not to love about Moesha, really? Except for those last 2 seasons, Moesha's a really solid show, and I definitely recommend checking it out. And overall, you know, great 90s TV, great black sitcom, great family. Just those last 2 seasons really messed it up. But do I personally want a Moesha reboot? Maybe. If you have seen any interviews with with Brandy, with anybody from the cast, if you've seen the episode of The Real when they did the reunion episode, if you've seen any of those things at all, then you might know that there's been super tiny, small, itty-bitty hints of like a reunion special, or like some kind of like, you know, finishing whatever was supposed to happen that never happened thanks to the cliffhanger. And I know it's really awkward because you really can't have a reboot or reunion without Lamont Bentley, or even Yvette Wilson, really, but Lamont Bentley especially. And, you know, he just was taken way too soon. And, you know, when I was watching the reunion episode of The Real, I even then saw Brandy and them like start to tear up a little bit. Like, it was really special, and I know he meant a lot to them. And so it'd just be really kind of awkward to like now try to have like a reunion or a reboot without him, because he's like a really fundamental, like important part to the show. But I think it could happen. And even if they just have like a super tiny itty bitty small like reunion episode where they just kind of all come together, like maybe they come together at like Hakeem's funeral or something, and then they just remember back into the good old days and like talk about that time. I could see that, or something, you know what I mean? But I just think it's going to be awkward to do like a whole reboot without him. So that's why I'm like mixed feelings about it. Like, on the one hand, I really want to know what would have happened, but on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know, because Lamont Bentley is not here, so what are they gonna do? But yeah, this is getting a C+ from me, maybe even a B, maybe I'll even give it a B. So yeah, this has been another episode of 80s 90s black sitcom mukbang, and I think the next one I'm gonna do is The Fresh Prince, because I love that show. Honestly, iconic. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed watching me eat Ethiopian food and talk about Moesha. And yeah, the show is wonderful except for the last 2 seasons, but I mean, it is what it is. So yeah, until next time, peace and blessings.